The marriage had been arranged with the precision of a business contract, signed and sealed before either party had truly met. Lady Evelyn Ashford stood at the altar in her ivory gown, her face a porcelain mask of composure, while Lord Adrian Blackwood recited vows with the mechanical efficiency of a man fulfilling an obligation. No one suspected that beneath the layers of silk and lace, Evelyn carried secrets etched into her very skin, marks of a past so brutal it had nearly destroyed her. And no one could have predicted that on this wedding night, when Adrian's fingers brushed against those hidden scars, everything they thought they knew about duty, honor, and each other would shatter like glass. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you're listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. The year was 1883, and London's elite whispered that the union between the Ashford and Blackwood families was the social triumph of the season. Lady Evelyn Ashford, at 22 years of age, possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that painters immortalized on canvas. Pale skin like moonlight, dark auburn hair that cascaded in careful ringlets, and eyes the color of stormy seas. Yet those who looked closely might have noticed how those eyes never quite met anyone's gaze, how her smile never reached beyond the practiced curve of her lips. She had been raised in Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate in the Cotswolds where every room echoed with the weight of ancestral expectations. Her father, the Earl of Ashford, was a man whose gambling debts had mounted like winter snow, silent and suffocating. Her mother had died when Evelyn was merely 14, leaving behind a daughter who learned too quickly that survival meant silence, that obedience was armor, and that a woman's worth was measured in her marriageability. The arrangement with Lord Adrian Blackwood had been negotiated over brandy and cigars in her father's study. Adrian was the second son of the Duke of Thornfield, a man of 30 years, with a reputation for cold pragmatism and shrewd business acumen. He had made his fortune in railway investments and needed a wife of proper breeding to solidify his position in society. The Ashfords needed his money to save their crumbling legacy. It was, by all aristocratic standards, a perfect match. Evelyn had met Adrian only 3 times before their wedding day. The first encounter had been at a garden party in Mayfair, where he had bowed over her hand with impeccable courtesy and discussed the weather with the enthusiasm one might reserve for reading a railway timetable. The second meeting occurred at the opera, where they sat in adjacent boxes and exchanged polite nods across the gilded distance. The third was at their engagement dinner, a formal affair where 50 guests watched them toast to a future neither had chosen. Adrian Blackwood was handsome in the severe way of marble statues, sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back from a high forehead, and eyes of such pale grey they seemed to see through pretense to the uncomfortable truths beneath. He spoke little, observed much, and carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who had learned early that emotion was weakness. Society called him brilliant. His business associates called him ruthless. No one called him warm. The wedding ceremony at St. George's Church in Hanover Square had been a spectacle of white roses and whispered gossip. Evelyn had walked down the aisle on her father's arm, feeling the weight of her gown like chains, the veil obscuring her vision like a shroud. When Adrian lifted that veil to seal their vows with a brief, perfunctory kiss, his lips had been as cold as January frost. Now, as their carriage rattled through the London streets toward Blackwood House in Belgravia, Evelyn sat as far from her new husband as the confined space allowed. The silence between them was absolute, broken only by the clatter of hooves on cobblestones and the distant cry of street vendors closing their stalls for the evening. Adrian stared out the window, his profile illuminated by the flickering gas lamps. Evelyn studied her gloved hands, folded precisely in her lap, and tried to calm the rising panic in her chest. She knew what was expected of her tonight. She had been prepared by her former governess, Mrs. Hartley, in the vaguest, most euphemistic terms possible, but Mrs. Hartley knew nothing of Evelyn's past, nothing of the scars that mapped her body like a cartographer's record of pain. Blackwood House loomed before them, a magnificent Georgian townhouse with black iron railings and windows that glowed with warm light. Servants lined the entrance, ready to welcome the new Lady Blackwood. Evelyn descended from the carriage with practiced grace, her spine straight, her expression serene. She had perfected this performance over years of necessity. The interior of Blackwood House was as austere as its master. Dark wood panelling, heavy furniture, and portraits of stern-faced ancestors who seemed to judge from their gilded frames. A housekeeper, Mrs. Pemberton, a woman of perhaps 50 with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanour, curtsied and offered congratulations. A butler, Harrison, ancient and dignified, announced that a light supper had been prepared in the dining room. Adrian dismissed them with a curt nod. "Lady Blackwood will require assistance preparing for the evening. See that her lady's maid attends her in the master suite." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. The master suite, the wedding night, the moment she had dreaded since the engagement was announced. She was led up a grand staircase by a young maid named Lily, who chattered nervously about the house and the staff and how honoured they all were to serve the new mistress. Evelyn barely heard her. Her mind was calculating, planning, desperately searching for a way to navigate the night ahead without revealing the truth written on her skin. The master suite was opulent, a large four-poster bed draped in deep blue velvet, a fireplace where flames danced and cast shifting shadows, and tall windows overlooking the private garden. A dressing room adjoined the bedroom, and it was there that Lily helped Evelyn out of her wedding gown, unlacing the dozens of tiny buttons with patient fingers. "Shall I help you into your nightdress, my lady?" Lily asked, her cheeks pink with the awkwardness of the situation. "No," Evelyn said quickly, too quickly. She softened her tone. "Thank you, Lily. I can manage. You may go." The maid curtsied and departed, leaving Evelyn alone in the dressing room. She stood before the full-length mirror in her chemise and corset, her reflection a ghost in the candlelight. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she began to unlace her corset. As the garment fell away, she saw them, the scars that crisscrossed her back and shoulders, some thin and silvery with age, others still faintly pink. They were the legacy of her father's rage, delivered with a riding crop during his drunken fits, punishments for imagined disobediences, for existing as a reminder of his failures. She had learned to hide them carefully. High-necked gowns, shawls, strategic positioning. But tonight, there would be no hiding. Tonight, her husband would see everything, and she had no idea how he would react. Would he be disgusted? Would he send her back to her father in shame? Would he use this knowledge as leverage, as another form of control? Evelyn pulled on the silk nightdress that had been laid out for her, a beautiful thing of ivory lace and delicate embroidery, designed for seduction. It did nothing to conceal the marks on her skin. She wrapped a dressing gown around herself, tying it tightly, and stepped back into the bedroom. Adrian was already there, standing by the fireplace in his shirt sleeves, his jacket and cravat discarded. He held a glass of whiskey and stared into the flames with an expression she couldn't read. When he heard her enter, he turned, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other across the expanse of the room. "I suppose," he said finally, his voice low and carefully neutral, "we should discuss the expectations of this arrangement." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Of course, my lord." "Adrian," he corrected. "We are married now. Formality seems excessive." He took a sip of his whiskey. "I do not expect affection, Evelyn. I do not require protestations of devotion. What I do require is discretion, propriety, and in time, an heir. Beyond that, we may live our lives with minimal interference in each other's affairs." It was the coldest proposal of marriage she could imagine, and yet there was a strange relief in its honesty. No pretense of love, no false promises, just the brutal truth of their transaction. "I understand," she whispered. He set down his glass and approached her, and Evelyn fought every instinct to retreat. He stopped a few feet away, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "You seem frightened," he observed. "I assure you I have no intention of being cruel." The irony of his words nearly made her laugh. He had no idea what cruelty truly looked like. He had no idea what she had endured to reach this moment. "I am not frightened," she lied, lifting her chin with a defiance she didn't feel. "I am merely uncertain of what is expected." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "Then let us proceed with honesty, at least in this." He extended his hand. "Come here, Evelyn." It was not a request. It was a command, delivered with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to obedience. Evelyn's hands shook as she untied her dressing gown, letting it slip from her shoulders to pool at her feet. She stood before him in only the thin nightdress, vulnerable and exposed, waiting for the moment when he would see the truth she had hidden for so long. Adrian's gaze travelled over her, clinical and assessing, and then his eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath and the faint scent of sandalwood from his soap. His hand reached out, and she flinched involuntarily. He froze. "What?" His fingers brushed against her shoulder, where the nightdress had slipped slightly, revealing the edge of a scar. His expression transformed from cold detachment to something else entirely, shock, and beneath it a rising fury that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "Who did this to you?" The question was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder. Adrian's fingers traced the scar with a gentleness that contradicted the storm gathering in his eyes. Evelyn stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to breathe. She had prepared herself for disgust, for rejection, for cold indifference. She had not prepared herself for rage, not on her behalf. "Answer me, Evelyn." His voice was steel, wrapped in silk. "Who marked you like this?" The words caught in her throat like thorns. Years of silence, of survival through submission, had taught her that speaking truth only brought more pain. But something in Adrian's expression, the way his jaw clenched, the way his hand trembled slightly against her skin, compelled her to answer. "My father," she whispered, the admission falling between them like a stone into still water. "When he drank, when his debts mounted, when I displeased him." Adrian's hand dropped away as though burned. He stepped back, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. For a terrible moment, Evelyn thought he would strike her, that she had made a catastrophic mistake in revealing her shame. Instead, he turned sharply toward the fireplace, gripping the mantelpiece with white-knuckled hands. "How long?" The question was directed at the flames. "Since I was 14, after my mother died." A glass shattered. Adrian had swept his whiskey tumbler from the mantel, sending it crashing into the hearth. The sound made Evelyn jump, old instincts screaming at her to flee, to hide, to make herself small and invisible. 8 years. Adrian's voice was hollow with disbelief. 8 years? And no one intervened? No one stopped him? Who would believe me? Evelyn's own voice surprised her with its bitterness. The Earl of Ashford, a respected peer of the realm, accused by his own daughter. I would have been called hysterical, ungrateful, mad. I would have been sent away to an asylum, and he would have continued as before, his reputation intact. Adrian turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she hadn't expected. Anguish. "And I," he said quietly, "negotiated with that monster for your hand, like you were livestock to be purchased. I paid him £30,000 to clear his debts and secure this marriage." The number struck Evelyn like a physical blow. £30,000. She had known her father was desperate, but she hadn't realized the extent of his depravity, selling his daughter's future to fund his vices. "You didn't know," she said, though the words felt inadequate. "Ignorance is not innocence." Adrian moved toward her again, more slowly this time, as though approaching a wounded animal. "May I see all of it?" Every fibre of her being screamed refusal. But Evelyn found herself nodding. She turned her back to him and lowered the nightdress from her shoulders, letting it fall to her waist. The cool air kissed her scarred skin, and she heard Adrian's sharp intake of breath. His fingers ghosted over her back, mapping the landscape of her suffering, the thin lines across her shoulders, the deeper welts that crossed her spine, the marks that spoke of systematic, repeated violence. She felt a wetness on her skin and realized with shock that Adrian was crying, silent tears falling onto the evidence of her father's cruelty. "Evelyn," her name was a broken prayer. "I am so profoundly sorry." She pulled the nightdress back up and turned to face him. Adrian Blackwood, the man society called cold and unfeeling, stood before her with tears streaming down his face, his composure shattered completely. "Why do you weep?" she asked, genuinely confused. "You are not responsible for what was done to me." "Because I am complicit," he said fiercely, "because I participated in a system that treats women as property, as bargaining chips in men's financial games. Because I looked at the arrangement of our marriage as a business transaction and never once considered that you might be suffering, that you might need rescue rather than acquisition." Something shifted in Evelyn's chest, a crack in the armor she had built around her heart. This was not the cold, pragmatic man she had married. This was someone capable of empathy, of moral outrage, of caring about her pain. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Adrian wiped his face with the back of his hand, visibly struggling to regain his composure. "Now," he said, his voice steadying, "we establish new terms. I will not touch you tonight, nor any night, until you explicitly wish it. This marriage may have been arranged, but I will not compound the violations you have already endured. You will have your own chambers prepared tomorrow. You will have autonomy over your days, your activities, your life. And your father," his voice hardened to granite, "will never come near you again. He will expect to visit," Evelyn warned. "He will expect access to your money, to your influence. Then he will be disappointed." Adrian's smile was cold and predatory. "I am very good at disappointing people who displease me, Evelyn. It is, in fact, one of my particular talents." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt something like hope unfurling in her chest. But hope was dangerous. Hope led to expectations, and expectations led to devastation when they were inevitably crushed. "Why are you being kind to me?" The question emerged smaller than she intended. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, his grey eyes searching her face. "Because kindness costs me nothing and may mean everything to you. Because I have spent my life building walls around my heart, and tonight, seeing what you have endured, those walls feel suddenly obscene. Because you deserve better than what you have been given, and while I cannot undo the past, I can perhaps make the future more bearable." He retrieved his jacket from where he had draped it over a chair and shrugged it on. "I will sleep in my study tonight. Tomorrow we will begin again, not as strangers bound by contract, but as two people attempting to build something resembling partnership from the ruins of an arranged marriage." He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the handle. "Evelyn, thank you for trusting me with your truth. I know what that cost you." Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone in the master suite with her racing thoughts and the dying fire. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. The wedding night she had dreaded had become something entirely unexpected. Not a violation, but a revelation. Not an ending, but perhaps, impossibly, a beginning. She touched her shoulder where Adrian's tears had fallen, and for the first time since her mother's death, Lady Evelyn Blackwood allowed herself to cry, not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, truly seen, and not turned away in disgust. Outside the bedroom window, London slept beneath a blanket of fog and gaslight. Inside, a woman who had learned to survive began tentatively to imagine what it might mean to live. The night stretched long and sleepless. Evelyn lay in the enormous bed, staring at the canopy above her, replaying every moment of the evening. Adrian's rage on her behalf, his tears, his promise of autonomy. It felt too good to be true, and experience had taught her that things too good to be true usually were. But as dawn broke over Belgravia, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Evelyn made a decision. She would accept Adrian's offer of partnership. She would step carefully, guardedly into this new life. And she would discover whether the man she had married was truly different from the monsters she had known, or simply better at hiding his cruelty. Either way, she would not be passive. She would not be silent. She had survived her father's brutality. She would survive whatever came next. The morning after her wedding night arrived with unexpected gentleness. Evelyn woke to find sunlight streaming through the tall windows and a breakfast tray waiting on the table beside her bed. Fresh scones, strawberry preserves, tea still steaming in a delicate porcelain pot. A note rested against the teapot, written in precise, angular handwriting. "I have business matters to attend to this morning. Mrs. Pemberton will assist you in settling into the house. The blue drawing room has been prepared as your private sitting room. Use it as you wish." A. Evelyn traced the single initial with her fingertip, studying the bold stroke of the pen. Even his handwriting spoke of control and precision. She ate slowly, savoring the simple pleasure of a meal taken without fear, without her father's unpredictable presence looming over the table. When Lily arrived to help her dress, the young maid's eyes were bright with curiosity barely contained. "Begging your pardon, my lady, but the master gave instructions that you're to have complete freedom of the house. He said you're to explore as you please and make any changes you desire." "Did he?" Evelyn felt that dangerous flutter of hope again. "Oh, yes, my lady, and he's asked Mrs. Pemberton to introduce you to all the staff properly, so everyone knows you're the mistress here now." Lily's smile was genuine and warm. "We're all so pleased to have a lady in residence again. The house has felt rather cold without one." Over the following days, Evelyn discovered that Blackwood House, despite its austere exterior, held unexpected treasures. The library was magnificent, 3 floors of books reaching toward a domed glass ceiling, with rolling ladders and comfortable reading chairs positioned near tall windows. She found volumes on history, philosophy, science, and literature in multiple languages. Adrian, it seemed, was a voracious reader. The blue drawing room that had been designated as hers was lovely, decorated in shades of azure and cream, with a pianoforte in one corner and a writing desk positioned to catch the afternoon light. Fresh flowers appeared daily, arranged by Mrs. Pemberton, who proved to be a woman of quiet competence and surprising warmth. But Adrian himself remained elusive. He left early for his offices in the city and returned late, taking his dinner in his study. They passed each other occasionally in hallways, exchanging polite greetings that felt increasingly absurd given the intimacy of what he knew about her. Evelyn couldn't decide if he was giving her space or avoiding her entirely. On the 5th day of her marriage, a visitor arrived who would change everything. Evelyn was in the library, absorbed in a volume of Wordsworth's poetry, when Mrs. Pemberton announced, "Lady Thornfield to see you, my lady." Evelyn's heart seized. Lady Thornfield, Adrian's mother, the Duchess. She had not attended the wedding, claiming illness, though Evelyn suspected the truth was simpler: disapproval of her son's choice of bride. The woman who swept into the library was formidable, tall and regal, with silver-streaked dark hair and the same penetrating grey eyes as her son. She wore black silk, still in mourning for the Duke who had died 2 years prior, and carried herself with the absolute authority of someone who had never been denied anything. "So," Lady Thornfield said without preamble, "you are the girl my son purchased to legitimize his position in society." Evelyn rose from her chair, her spine straight, despite the insult. "I am Lady Evelyn Blackwood, yes, your son's wife." "His wife in name." The Duchess circled her like a predator assessing prey. "Tell me, girl, what exactly did the Earl of Ashford offer along with your hand? What dowry accompanied such a hasty arrangement?" "I believe that is a question better directed at my husband, your grace." Lady Thornfield's eyebrows rose. You have a tongue, at least. I wondered if you were simply a pretty, empty-headed ornament. She settled into a chair without invitation. Sit down, child. I did not come here to torment you, despite appearances. Evelyn sat cautiously, her hands folded in her lap. My son, the Duchess continued, has always been difficult to understand. Brilliant, certainly, successful beyond measure, but emotionally opaque. He feels things deeply but shows nothing. It makes him excellent in business and rather terrible at human relationships. She studied Evelyn with unsettling intensity. Yet something about this marriage has disturbed his usual equilibrium. He came to see me yesterday, something he rarely does, and spoke of you with a protectiveness I have never heard from him regarding anyone. Evelyn's breath caught. He spoke of me. He informed me, in no uncertain terms, that you are under his protection, and that anyone who treats you with anything less than complete respect will answer to him personally. He also mentioned that your father is no longer welcome in this house, or in your life. Lady Thornfield leaned forward. What I wish to know, Lady Evelyn, is what transpired between you to inspire such fierce loyalty in a man who trusts no one. The question hung in the air between them. Evelyn weighed her options carefully. She could deflect, could maintain the polite fiction that everything was perfectly normal. Or she could take a risk, trust that Adrian's mother might be an ally rather than an enemy. Your son, Evelyn said quietly, showed me kindness when he had no obligation to do so. He saw my suffering and responded with compassion rather than indifference. In my experience, such behavior is rare enough to inspire loyalty in return. Lady Thornfield's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You have been hurt. It was not a question. Evelyn met the older woman's gaze steadily. I have survived, Your Grace. There is a difference. For a long moment, the Duchess said nothing. Then she rose and moved to the window, looking out over the garden. Adrian's father was a cruel man, she said finally. Charming in public, monstrous in private. I learned early in my marriage that survival required strategy, patience, and the cultivation of one's own sources of power. I could not leave. Divorce was unthinkable, and I had children to protect. So I endured, and I taught my sons to be better than their father. She turned back to Evelyn. Adrian succeeded. His older brother, the current Duke, did not. He inherited his father's worst qualities. Her voice hardened. What I am telling you, child, is that I recognize the look in your eyes. I know what it means to wear scars that others cannot see, and I am offering you something I wish someone had offered me. Alliance. Evelyn felt tears prickling behind her eyes. Why would you help me? Because my son has chosen you, and despite his cold exterior, Adrian's judgment in matters of character is impeccable. Because I see potential in you that you have not yet recognized in yourself, and because women of our class must help each other survive the cages we are born into. Lady Thornfield extended her hand. Will you accept my friendship, Evelyn? Evelyn stood and took the offered hand, feeling the firm, warm grip of genuine connection. Yes, Your Grace. Gratefully. Excellent. Then we begin your education immediately. The Duchess's smile was sharp and knowing. You are now Lady Blackwood, wife of one of London's most influential men. That position carries power if you know how to wield it. I will teach you how to navigate society, how to build alliances, how to transform from victim to victor. Are you willing to learn? Yes, Evelyn breathed, feeling something fierce and bright kindling in her chest. Yes, I am. Over the following weeks, Lady Thornfield became a constant presence in Evelyn's life. She arrived each afternoon with lessons in deportment, conversation, and the subtle arts of social manipulation. She taught Evelyn which families held real power versus those who merely pretended, which hostesses could make or break a reputation, and how to read the undercurrents of any gathering. Society is a battlefield, the Duchess explained during one lesson, and reputation is your armor. You must be beyond reproach in public, while cultivating genuine relationships in private. You must appear gracious while being strategic. You must smile while calculating your next move. Evelyn proved an apt pupil. Years of reading her father's moods to avoid his violence had honed her observational skills. She learned quickly, absorbed everything, and began to feel a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. Adrian observed these changes with quiet approval. He began joining Evelyn for dinner several evenings a week, and their conversations evolved from stilted politeness to genuine discourse. They discussed books, politics, philosophy. Adrian was surprised to discover his wife's sharp intellect and quick wit. Evelyn was surprised to find her husband possessed a dry sense of humor and unexpected depths of feeling beneath his controlled exterior. One evening, as they sat in the library after dinner, Adrian said, "My mother tells me you are a remarkable student." "Your mother is a remarkable teacher," Evelyn replied, looking up from her book. "She also tells me you have not left the house since our wedding." Adrian's tone was carefully neutral. "Are you afraid to be seen in public because of your father?" Evelyn considered the question honestly. "Partially, but also because I am not yet ready. Your mother is preparing me, but I need more time before I face society as Lady Blackwood." "Take all the time you need," Adrian said, "but know that when you are ready, I will stand beside you. No one will dare slight you while you are under my protection." Their eyes met across the space between their chairs, and something unspoken passed between them. Understanding, respect, and the first fragile threads of something that might, eventually, become trust. 3 months after her wedding, Lady Evelyn Blackwood made her debut into London society at the Duchess of Pembroke's Autumn Ball, one of the most prestigious events of the season. She descended from the Blackwood carriage in a gown of deep emerald silk that Lady Thornfield had commissioned specifically for the occasion. The dress was cut to perfection, with long sleeves and a high neckline that concealed her scars while emphasizing her graceful figure. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, Adrian's wedding gift finally worn for the first time. Adrian stood beside her, resplendent in black evening dress, and offered his arm. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. Evelyn took a steadying breath. Through the open doors of Pembroke House, she could hear music and laughter, could see the glittering crowd of London's elite. Somewhere in that crowd would be her father, who had been sending increasingly desperate letters demanding money and access. Letters Adrian had intercepted and burned without showing her. "I am ready," she said, and meant it. They entered together, and the announcement rang out. Lord Adrian Blackwood and Lady Evelyn Blackwood. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Evelyn felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her, judging her, measuring her worth. She lifted her chin and smiled with the serene confidence Lady Thornfield had drilled into her, and walked into the ballroom like she owned it. The Duchess of Pembroke, a formidable woman in purple silk, greeted them warmly. "Lady Evelyn, how delightful to finally meet you properly. Adrian has been hiding you away like a miser hoards gold." My wife has been settling into her new life," Adrian replied smoothly. "I saw no reason to rush her into the circus of society before she was ready." "How considerate," the Duchess said, though her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "You must allow me to introduce her around. There are so many people eager to make her acquaintance." But what followed was a whirlwind of introductions: viscounts and their wives, members of Parliament, wealthy industrialists, and society matrons who controlled the guest lists that determined one's social standing. Evelyn navigated each conversation with the skills Lady Thornfield had taught her, asking intelligent questions, offering thoughtful observations, and revealing just enough personality to be interesting without being scandalous. She was speaking with Lady Catherine Ashworth, a prominent hostess known for her literary salon, when she felt Adrian stiffen beside her. Following his gaze, she saw her father across the ballroom. The Earl of Ashford looked diminished somehow, his face florid, and his evening clothes slightly shabby. He was speaking with a group of gentlemen who looked distinctly uncomfortable, clearly trying to extract himself from a conversation they did not wish to continue. When his eyes found Evelyn, his expression transformed into something predatory and desperate. He began moving toward them through the crowd. "Shall I have him removed?" Adrian asked, his voice dangerously soft. "No," Evelyn said, surprising herself with her own calm. "Let him come. I am not the frightened girl he knew, not anymore." The Earl reached them, his smile oily and false. "Evelyn, my dear daughter, how radiant you look. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "Lord Ashford," Evelyn said coolly, not using the word father. "What an unexpected encounter." His smile faltered slightly. "Surely you are not still angry about our little misunderstanding? I have written to you multiple times without response." "There was no misunderstanding," Evelyn said clearly, aware that Lady Catherine and several others were listening with barely concealed interest. "And my husband handles all correspondence on my behalf. If your letters went unanswered, it was by design." The Earl's face darkened. He turned to Adrian. "Blackwood, surely you do not approve of this disrespect. A daughter owes her father nothing when that father has forfeited all claim to respect or affection through his own actions." Adrian interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. "You sold your daughter to clear your debts, Ashford. You have been paid. That transaction is complete. You have no further business with my wife or with me." The Earl's face purpled with rage. "You dare speak to me this way? I am an Earl of the realm. And I am a man with considerable influence and even more considerable resources," Adrian said softly, stepping closer to the older man. "I suggest you consider carefully before making a scene. I know things about your financial situation, your gambling debts, and your other indiscretions that would make fascinating reading in the society pages. Do we understand each other?" The threat hung in the air between them. The Earl looked from Adrian to Evelyn, and she saw the moment he recognized that his power over her was truly broken. His daughter was no longer alone and vulnerable. She was protected by a man who would not hesitate to destroy him. "This is not over," the Earl hissed. "Oh, but it is," Evelyn said, her voice steady and clear. "You will leave this ball. You will not approach me again. And you will accept that I am no longer yours to control or to hurt. Goodbye, Lord Ashford." She turned her back on him, a deliberate, devastating dismissal, and resumed her conversation with Lady Catherine, as though nothing had happened. After a moment of stunned silence, the Earl retreated, his shoulders hunched in defeat. Lady Catherine's eyes gleamed with approval. "My dear Lady Evelyn, you must attend my next salon. I have a feeling you will fit in beautifully with our circle." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of triumph. Word of the confrontation spread through the ballroom with the speed of wildfire, and Evelyn found herself suddenly surrounded by people eager to make her acquaintance. The narrative that emerged was deliciously scandalous. The brave young bride standing up to her tyrannical father, protected by her devoted husband. Society loved nothing more than a dramatic story, and Evelyn had just provided them with one. As the evening drew to a close, Adrian led her onto the dance floor for a waltz. It was the first time they had danced together since their wedding, and Evelyn was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the warmth of his palm against hers. "You were magnificent tonight," Adrian said as they moved through the steps. "I have never been more proud to call someone my wife." Evelyn looked up at him, seeing genuine admiration in his grey eyes. "I could not have done it without you, without your protection, your support." "You underestimate yourself," Adrian interrupted gently. "The strength was always yours, Evelyn. I merely provided the circumstances for you to recognize it." Something shifted between them in that moment, something profound and irreversible. The careful distance they had maintained, the polite formality that had characterized their marriage, began to dissolve. Evelyn felt it in the way Adrian's hand tightened slightly at her waist, in the way his eyes held hers, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Adrian," she began, not knowing what she wanted to say. "I know," he said softly. "I feel it too." The waltz ended, but they remained standing together on the dance floor for a heartbeat longer than necessary, neither willing to break the connection. The spell was broken by the arrival of Lady Thornfield, resplendent in black silk and diamonds, her smile sharp with satisfaction. "Well done, both of you. That performance was worthy of the stage. The Earl of Ashford has already departed, looking thoroughly defeated, and you, my dear Evelyn, are now the most talked-about woman in London." "Is that good or bad?" Evelyn asked. "In society, my dear, being talked about is always good, provided the narrative is favourable. And tonight, you controlled the narrative beautifully." The Duchess turned to her son. "Adrian, Lord Pemberton wishes to speak with you about a railway investment. I will keep Evelyn company." Adrian bowed and departed, leaving Evelyn alone with her mother-in-law. Lady Thornfield linked her arm through Evelyn's and guided her toward a quiet alcove, away from the crowd. "I must tell you something," the Duchess said, her tone serious. "Your father is a desperate man, and desperate men are dangerous. Tonight was a victory, but it may provoke him to more drastic measures. You must be vigilant." "What could he possibly do?" Evelyn asked. "Adrian has made it clear that I am under his protection. He could spread rumours, manufacture scandals, attempt to damage your reputation in ways that even Adrian's influence cannot entirely prevent." Lady Thornfield's expression was grave. "I do not say this to frighten you, child, but to prepare you. The battle is not over. It has merely entered a new phase." Evelyn nodded slowly, absorbing this wisdom. "Then I will be ready for whatever comes." "Good girl." Lady Thornfield squeezed her arm affectionately. "Now, let us rejoin the festivities. You have a reputation to solidify and alliances to build. The night is young, and you, my dear, are just beginning to discover your power." As they returned to the ballroom, Evelyn caught sight of herself in one of the tall mirrors that lined the walls. The woman reflected there was almost unrecognizable from the frightened bride of 3 months ago. This woman stood tall, her eyes bright with confidence, her smile genuine. This woman was Lady Evelyn Blackwood, and she was no longer anyone's victim. She was, she realized with a thrill of exhilaration, becoming someone entirely new, someone strong, capable, and unafraid. And beside her stood a husband who saw her not as property to be owned, but as a partner to be respected. The future, for the first time in her life, looked bright with possibility. The weeks following the Pembroke Ball brought a flurry of invitations, afternoon teas, literary salons, charity committees, and dinner parties. Evelyn found herself welcomed into circles that had previously been closed to her, not because of her family name, but because of who she was becoming. Lady Catherine Ashworth's salon proved particularly rewarding, introducing her to writers, artists, and progressive thinkers who valued intellect over pedigree. It was at one of these gatherings that Evelyn met Dr. James Whitmore, a physician who had recently returned from studying advanced surgical techniques in Vienna. He was a man of perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a passion for improving medical care for London's poor. When he learned of Evelyn's interest in social reform, he invited her to visit the charitable clinic he had established in Whitechapel. "Many ladies of quality support our work financially, Doctor," Whitmore explained, "but few have the courage to see firsthand the conditions we are trying to ameliorate. If you are serious about making a difference, Lady Blackwood, I would welcome your involvement." Evelyn accepted immediately, much to Adrian's initial concern. "Whitechapel is dangerous," he said that evening over dinner. "The poverty, the crime, it is no place for a woman of your standing." "Then perhaps women of my standing should go there more often," Evelyn replied calmly. "How can we claim to care about society's problems if we refuse to witness them? Dr. Whitmore has offered me an opportunity to do meaningful work, Adrian. I intend to accept it." Adrian studied her across the table, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You have changed remarkably, Evelyn. 3 months ago you would not have dared contradict me. 3 months ago I did not know if I could trust you." she said honestly. Now I do, and I trust that you will support my desire to be useful even if it makes you uncomfortable. I do support it, Adrian said, but I insist on providing you with proper protection. Harrison will accompany you, along with 2 footmen, and you will go during daylight hours only. It was a compromise Evelyn could accept. The following week she made her first visit to the Whitechapel Clinic, and what she saw there broke her heart and ignited her determination. Women with children clinging to their skirts, desperate for medical care they could not afford. Men injured in factory accidents, unable to work and support their families. The elderly, sick and alone, with no one to care for them. Dr. Whitmore and his small staff worked tirelessly, but they were overwhelmed by the need. Evelyn rolled up her sleeves, literally, and spent the day helping where she could. She held children while the doctor examined them, distributed blankets and food, and listened to stories of hardship that made her own suffering seem almost trivial by comparison. When she returned to Blackwood House that evening, exhausted and emotionally drained, Adrian was waiting in the entrance hall. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms without a word. Evelyn stiffened in surprise. They had maintained careful physical distance since their wedding night, but then she melted into the embrace, accepting the comfort he offered. It was terrible, she whispered against his chest. The poverty, the suffering. Adrian, we have so much, and they have nothing. Then we will help them, Adrian said simply. Tell me what they need, and I will provide it. Over the following months, Adrian became Evelyn's partner in philanthropy. He funded expansions to the clinic, hired additional staff, and used his business connections to secure donations of medical supplies and food. Evelyn organized a committee of society ladies to support the work, transforming charitable giving from a fashionable hobby into a serious endeavor. Their marriage, which had begun as a cold transaction, evolved into something neither had anticipated, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They spent evenings discussing their projects, debating philosophy and politics, discovering each other's minds and hearts. But the spectre of the Earl of Ashford still haunted them. The confrontation came on a grey November afternoon. Evelyn was in her sitting room, reviewing accounts for the clinic, when Mrs. Pemberton announced an unexpected visitor. The Earl of Ashford is here, my lady. He insists on seeing you. He appears agitated. Evelyn's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Where is Lord Blackwood? At his offices in the city, my lady. Evelyn made a decision. Show the Earl into the drawing room, and send a footman to fetch Lord Blackwood immediately. Tell him it is urgent. She descended the stairs with her spine straight and her head high, channeling every lesson Lady Thornfield had taught her. Her father stood in the drawing room, his appearance even more dishevelled than at the ball. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, and he reeked of whiskey. Evelyn, he said, his voice slurring slightly, my daughter, you will listen to me now. I will listen, Evelyn said, remaining near the door, but I make no promises beyond that. What do you want? What do I want? His laugh was bitter and ugly. I want what is owed to me. I am your father. You owe me respect, obedience, and financial support. Instead, you have turned your back on me, allowed your husband to threaten me, and left me to rot in poverty while you live in luxury. You sold me, Evelyn said, her voice cold and clear. You took £30,000 from Adrian to clear your gambling debts. That money was payment in full for any obligation I might have owed you. We are finished. We are not finished! The Earl lurched toward her, and Evelyn saw the familiar rage building in his eyes, the same rage that had preceded so many beatings. You are my daughter, my property, and you will do as I command. He raised his hand to strike her, and Evelyn did not flinch. She stood her ground, meeting his eyes with steady defiance. Touch me, she said softly, and you will regret it. The blow never landed. Adrian appeared in the doorway like an avenging angel, moving with shocking speed to intercept the Earl's arm. He twisted it behind the older man's back, forcing him to his knees with controlled violence. You were warned, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. "You were told to stay away from my wife. You chose not to listen. You cannot do this to me," the Earl gasped, struggling futilely. "I am a peer of the realm, and I am a man with evidence of your crimes," Adrian replied. "Assault, fraud, embezzlement from your own estate. Shall I continue? I have been investigating you, Ashford, and what I have discovered would see you stripped of your title and imprisoned. The only reason I have not yet acted is because doing so would cause Evelyn pain by association." He released the Earl, who collapsed onto the carpet wheezing. "But if you ever approach my wife again, if you ever threaten her or attempt to contact her, I will unleash everything I have compiled. Your title, your reputation, your freedom, all of it will be destroyed. Do you understand me?" The Earl looked up at Adrian, then at Evelyn, and she saw the moment his spirit finally broke. He was not a powerful man confronting a disobedient daughter. He was a broken, desperate creature, facing two people who would no longer be his victims. "I understand," he whispered. "Good. Now get out of my house." Adrian gestured to Harrison, who had appeared with 2 footmen. "Escort Lord Ashford from the premises. If he returns, you have my permission to use whatever force is necessary to remove him." As her father was led away, Evelyn felt something inside her release. A tension she had carried for so long it had become part of her. She swayed slightly, and Adrian was there immediately, his arms around her, supporting her weight. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "He cannot hurt you anymore. I promise you, Evelyn, it is over." She looked up at him, this man who had become so much more than a husband of convenience, and saw in his eyes something that made her breath catch. Not just protectiveness or respect, but something deeper, warmer, more profound. "Adrian," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am no longer afraid," she said. "Not of my father, not of society, not of the future. And I realize now that I am no longer afraid of this, of us." She reached up and touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw with gentle fingers. Adrian's eyes darkened with emotion. "Evelyn, I do not want you to feel obligated." "I do not feel obligated," she interrupted. "I feel grateful, I feel respected, and I feel something else, something I never expected to feel in an arranged marriage." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "I feel love, Adrian. I have fallen in love with my husband." Yet for a moment, Adrian simply stared at her, his expression stunned. Then he cupped her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "I have loved you since the night I saw your scars and understood your courage," he said hoarsely. "I have loved you through every conversation, every shared purpose, every moment of watching you transform from a frightened girl into the remarkable woman you were always meant to be. I love you, Evelyn Blackwood, with everything I am." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the perfunctory kiss at their wedding. This was passion and tenderness, promise and devotion, the sealing of a bond that had been forged through adversity and tempered by mutual respect. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Evelyn smiled, a real smile, full of joy and hope. "What happens now?" "Now," Adrian said, his own smile transforming his usually serious face, "we begin our marriage properly. Not as strangers fulfilling obligations, but as partners who have chosen each other, as lovers who have earned the right to happiness." "I choose you," Evelyn said softly. "And I choose you," Adrian replied, "today and every day forward." Spring arrived in London with a riot of colour, cherry blossoms in the parks, daffodils in window boxes, and a softness in the air that spoke of renewal and new beginnings. It had been 8 months since Evelyn's confrontation with her father, 8 months of building a life she had never imagined possible. The Earl of Ashford had departed London shortly after that final encounter, retreating to what remained of his estate in the countryside. Rumours circulated that he had taken ill, that his finances were in ruins, that he had become a recluse. Evelyn felt no satisfaction in his downfall, but neither did she feel guilt. He had made his choices, and she had made hers. On a bright April morning, Evelyn stood in the newly expanded Whitechapel Clinic, watching as Dr. Whitmore examined a young mother and her infant. The clinic had grown remarkably. What had begun as a single room now occupied an entire building, with separate areas for examinations, a small surgical theatre, and a dispensary where patients could receive medicines free of charge. "Lady Blackwood, Dr. Whitmore called. Would you assist me for a moment?" Evelyn moved to his side, no longer squeamish about the realities of medical work. Over the past months, she had learned to change dressings, comfort frightened children, and even assist with minor procedures. The work was challenging and often heartbreaking, but it gave her a sense of purpose that society balls and tea parties never could. "The baby is thriving, Doctor," Whitmore told the young mother, a woman named Sarah who worked in a match factory. "Thanks to the nutrition program Lady Blackwood established, we are seeing far fewer cases of infant mortality in this district." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you, my lady. Without this place, without your help, my little Thomas might not have survived." Evelyn squeezed the woman's hand gently. "You need not thank me, Sarah. Every child deserves a chance to thrive. I'm simply grateful we can provide that chance." As Sarah departed with her healthy baby, Dr. Whitmore turned to Evelyn with an expression of profound respect. "You have accomplished something remarkable here, Lady Blackwood. When we first met, I thought you were simply another wealthy lady seeking to ease her conscience with charitable work. I was wrong. You have genuine compassion and an extraordinary capacity for leadership. This clinic exists because of your vision and your husband's generosity. It exists because people like you dedicate your lives to healing," Evelyn corrected. "I merely help where I can." "You do far more than that," a familiar voice said from the doorway. Evelyn turned to find Adrian standing there, elegant and slightly out of place in his expensive tailoring amid the clinic's humble surroundings. Her heart still skipped when she saw him, even after months of marriage. Perhaps, especially after months of marriage, now that she knew the depth of his character, the warmth beneath his controlled exterior. "Adrian, I did not expect you until this evening. I finished my meetings early and thought I might escort my wife home." He moved to her side, his hand finding hers naturally. "Dr. Whitmore, I trust all is well?" "More than well, Lord Blackwood. Your wife is performing miracles here. She has a talent for that," Adrian said, his eyes on Evelyn's face. "It is one of the many reasons I love her." Even after months of hearing such declarations, Evelyn felt warmth bloom in her chest. Their marriage had transformed into something beautiful, a partnership of equals built on respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. They had moved beyond the trauma of their beginnings into something neither had dared hope for: happiness. As they travelled home in the carriage, Adrian said, "I have news. The railway expansion we have been planning, the board has approved it. We will be extending lines into 3 new counties, which means jobs for thousands of workers and improved transportation for goods and people." "That is wonderful," Evelyn said. "You have worked so hard on this project." "We have worked hard," Adrian corrected. "Your insights about the social impact, your suggestions for worker protections, those were instrumental in securing the board's approval. You are as much a part of this success as I am." Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder, marveling at how natural such intimacy had become. "Do you remember our wedding night?" she asked softly. "How terrified I was, how certain I was that marriage would be another form of imprisonment." "I remember," Adrian said, his arm tightening around her. "I remember seeing your scars and understanding, perhaps for the first time in my life, that my privilege came with responsibility. That I had the power to either harm or heal, and that the choice was mine." "You chose to heal," Evelyn said. "You gave me space to become myself, protection to feel safe, and partnership to discover my strength. You gave me everything, Adrian." You gave me far more, he replied. You taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness, and that love, real love, is worth any risk. Before you, I was successful but empty. Now I am whole. They arrived at Blackwood House to find Lady Thornfield waiting in the drawing-room, her expression unusually animated. Excellent. You are both here. I have news that cannot wait. What is it, mother? Adrian asked, helping Evelyn remove her cloak. Lady Catherine Ashworth has proposed something extraordinary. She wishes to establish a foundation dedicated to women's education and welfare, and she wants Evelyn to serve as its director. Lady Thornfield's eyes gleamed with pride. It would be a paid position, Evelyn, with real authority and resources. You would oversee programs across London, working with schools, hospitals, and charitable organizations to improve conditions for women and children. Evelyn's breath caught. A paid position? But I am a married woman of the aristocracy, which is precisely why it matters. Lady Thornfield interrupted. You would be breaking new ground, demonstrating that women of our class can be more than ornaments, that we can contribute meaningfully to society, not just through charity, but through professional work. It is revolutionary, my dear, and you are the perfect person to lead this revolution. Evelyn looked at Adrian, searching his face for any sign of disapproval. Instead, she saw only encouragement and pride. It is your decision, Evelyn, he said, but I think you would be magnificent in such a role. You have already proven your capabilities at the clinic. This would simply be a larger stage for your talents. I want to do it, Evelyn said, the words emerging with absolute certainty. I want to make a real difference, to help other women find the strength and opportunities I have found. Yes, I will accept Lady Catherine's offer. Lady Thornfield clapped her hands together in delight. Excellent. I shall send word immediately. Oh, Evelyn, I am so proud of you. You have exceeded every expectation, overcome every obstacle, and become a force for genuine good in this world. That evening, as Evelyn and Adrian prepared for bed, they now shared the master suite, the separate chambers long abandoned. Evelyn stood before the mirror in her nightdress, studying her reflection. The scars were still there, faint lines across her shoulders and back, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her history, evidence of what she had survived and overcome. Adrian came up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "I am thinking about how far I have come," Evelyn said. 8 months ago, I stood in this room terrified of you, of the future, of everything. I thought my life was over, that I was simply trading one prison for another. But you showed me that I was wrong. You showed me that even in an arranged marriage, even in circumstances we did not choose, we can create something beautiful. She turned in his arms to face him. I am thinking that I am grateful for every moment that led me here, even the painful ones, because they made me strong enough to appreciate what we have built together. Adrian kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, with a tenderness that still made her heart race. I am the grateful one, he murmured. You took a cold, closed-off man and taught him how to feel, how to love, how to be truly alive. You are my miracle, Evelyn, and you are mine, she whispered. They made love that night with the gentle passion of two people who had earned their intimacy through trust and time, who had chosen each other not once, but repeatedly, in 1,000 small moments of kindness and understanding. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Evelyn thought about the girl she had been, frightened, scarred, convinced that happiness was impossible. That girl would never have believed that such joy existed, that love could be real and lasting, that she could become someone powerful and purposeful. Adrian, she said into the quiet. Yes, my love, thank you for seeing me. Not just the surface, not just the scars, but the person I could become. Thank you for giving me the space and safety to bloom. You were always going to bloom, Evelyn, Adrian replied, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. You just needed soil that nourished rather than poisoned you. I am honored to have provided that soil, but the strength, the beauty, the growth, that was always yours." Evelyn smiled in the darkness, feeling a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had survived her father's cruelty. She had transformed a loveless arrangement into a genuine partnership. She had found purpose, power, and love in the most unexpected places. And tomorrow, she would begin her new role as director of the Women's Education and Welfare Foundation, using her position and resources to help other women find their own paths to freedom and fulfillment. The future stretched before her, bright with possibility, and for the first time in her life, Lady Evelyn Blackwood was not afraid of what it might hold. She had learned that she was stronger than her scars, braver than her fears, and capable of creating beauty from even the most broken beginnings. She had learned finally to bloom exactly where she was planted, and in blooming, she had transformed not just her own life, but the lives of everyone she touched. As spring turned to summer and the work of the foundation flourished, Evelyn often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment of fulfillment. The wedding night that had begun in cold silence and fear had become the foundation of a love story neither she nor Adrian could have predicted, a story of healing, transformation, and the profound power of choosing compassion over cruelty. The scars she had hidden beneath her wedding gown would always be part of her history, but they no longer defined her future. They were simply evidence of survival, proof that she had endured the unendurable and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined to ensure that other women would not suffer as she had. In the years that followed, the Blackwoods became known not just for their wealth and social position, but for their genuine commitment to social reform. The Whitechapel Clinic expanded into a network of medical facilities across London's poorest districts. The Women's Education and Welfare Foundation opened schools, training programs, and safe houses for women escaping dangerous situations. And Evelyn herself became a voice for those who had no voice, using her position to advocate for legal reforms that would protect vulnerable women and children. Adrian stood beside her through it all, her partner in every sense of the word, supporting her work, celebrating her victories, and reminding her on difficult days that she was loved, valued, and capable of changing the world. Their marriage, which had begun as a transaction between desperate men, became a testament to the possibility of redemption and transformation. It proved that even in the darkest circumstances, even when choice seems impossible, human beings have the capacity to create light, to choose kindness, and to build something beautiful from the ruins of what was broken. Lady Evelyn Blackwood had learned the most important lesson of all, that true freedom comes not from the absence of scars, but from the courage to live fully despite them. That love, when it is real and earned, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And that every person, no matter how damaged or defeated they may feel, carries within them the seeds of their own transformation. All they need is the right soil in which to bloom. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more emotional tales, and share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach others who might need to hear them. Thank you for being part of this journey.